Stop 21 was to the Breakers in Rhode Island. It's a neighborhood. The Breakers is a neighborhood of huge Gilded Age mansions that house the wealthiest of the wealthy of Americans. During our rise as a free market powerhouse, really, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, I wasn't allowed to take photographs inside, so most of what you'll see in this video is from online sources, or it's the stuff that I tried to rapidly take quickly. The home that we toured was Cornelius Vanderbilt. He was a man who rose to power, he operated most of the major railroads in the United States that were constructed on the East Coast and increasingly westward in America's growth in the post-Civil War period from about 1860 to 1900. You've probably heard the Vanderbilt name before. He does have a university that he founded named after himself. So really, this was the time. It was the rise of the Industrial Revolution in America, and for the first time, Americans began to question the laissez-faire capitalist system that had served as its foundation and growth model. Laissez-faire meaning hands-off, like the government doesn't regulate the economy. And the government didn't regulate economic activities for the most part. Private individuals and companies, they could do what they want. They were left to their own devices, and everyone, from factory owners to day laborers, they took advantage. Everyone was working to get by and put themselves ahead economically. But this was before any sort of government oversight, so there was no monopoly or collusion or labor or graduated income tax laws of any sort. And slowly, the owners of the major industries became very, very wealthy. And all of a sudden, the day-to-day laborer who had bought into the idea that his labor would eventually lead him to a better life as long as he worked, began to question if the system was structured in a way that would allow that to happen. So they began to question long hours and poor safety conditions and low pay, and they began to question it because of people like Vanderbilt. Adjusted for inflation today, Vanderbilt would be worth close to $150 billion. I can't even really fathom that number. And that puts him as the second wealthiest man in American history. Not just today, but American history. He would be the second wealthiest man, I think only to John D. Rockefeller. So, which, it starts to make sense when you tour his house with the pictures you're looking at now and begin to think you're sort of in like the American version of Versailles or something. So the question then becomes, and this is a question we still ask and try to answer today, is this okay? Was Vanderbilt just another American hard worker who used his brain and talent to build an empire? Is this a fair reward for work or an unfair result of a system in need of restructuring? And again, that debate occurred in the time of Vanderbilt. It's the first time on a large scale that debate occurred in the United States, and it continues to this day. Even though today we have a regulated economy, it's a lot more mixed. We do have a graduated income tax and an estate tax that's placed to avoid wealthy individuals like this over many generations. But we still wrestle with immense wealth and whether or not it's a good or a bad thing. So I want to know, what do you think? It's a cliche at this point, but it's a debate worth having. It's sort of like classic U.S. history classroom question to do some research. So what do you think? Was Vanderbilt and those like him, was he a hero or a villain? Was he a sort of a capitalist superhero, or was he a robber baron who took advantage of a corrupt system to use his wealth for awful things? So that's the question for this round, and I'm curious to see what you say.